Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Long.
Hello and welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Murrimina people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday the 6th of May 2024. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda paper on Council's website. Item number 2, apologies. We have a full house this evening, so there are none. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associates. Are there any declarations from councillors? Well, colleagues, as some of you may be aware, last month the CEO of Southern Waste Solutions, Mr Chris Adal, tragically lost his relatively short battle with leukaemia. During my time as Director of C-Cell Proprietary Limited, I had the pleasure of working closely with Chris, as did Councillor Chong, who replaced me in this role. As Chair of the Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority, Councillor Walker has worked most closely with Chris in recent times. Councillor Walker, Councillor Chong, our CEO, Mr Nelson, and myself represented council at Chris's funeral early today. Chris was enormously talented and much admired, and he leaves behind a wife and a young son. At this sad time, our thoughts and prayers go out to them, and as a sign of respect, I ask that we all stand for a moment in memory of Chris. Thank you. Please be seated. Now we're heading to our Omnibus items. Item number 4 is confirmation of the minutes, that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 15th of April 2024 have been circulated. Are there any matters arising? There being none, we move now on to item 4.2, Mayor's Communications. 4.2.1, Mayor's Diary Entries. My diary entries from the 16th of April through to today have been circulated, as well as the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, and Councillor Goyne, who have represented me, and I thank them very much for that. Moving on to item 4.3, Council Workshops, as listed in the agenda. 4.4, tabling of petitions. CEO, are there any petitions?
Not that I'm aware.
Councillors, Councillor James.
Yes, Mr Mayor, and I only received this morning, so again, it'll have to go through the normal process. It's a petition signed by 48 residents, and it says, amongst other things, to the Mayor and the councillors, the City of Clarence, we request Council undertake urgent draining works to prevent further flooding of the properties on the southern side of Evandale Street, South Arm.
Thank you, Councillor James. So tabled. Thank you. Are there any other petitions from colleagues? There being none, we move now on to item 4.5, reports from outside bodies. Councillor Walker, Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority.
Look, I think you've covered the major upheaval that the organisation is going through, and I thank you for the words you said at the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. We now move on to Southern Tasmanian Regional Waste Authority. Councillor Warren, I believe you would like to table a quarterly report.
Yes, that's correct. I did actually submit this electronically, but a paper copy's appeared on my table, which is unfortunate since it's a waste report, and so I'd like to table a slightly damp copy of the quarterly report for the Southern Tasmania Regional Waste Authority.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. There's nothing to report from either the Taswater Corporation or the Greater Hobart Committee, although I note that Councillor Chong would like to present or talk to the Richmond Bicentenary report. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I mean, I have several others to table as well. Would you like those first or afterwards?
Oh, your choice, entirely your choice.
I will officially table, I have electronically sent them, the March minutes from the Richmond Advisory Committee, the February minutes from the Cycling South, and I will table the CSAL minutes in closed meeting.
Wonderful, thank you.
And yes, included in the agenda is I hesitate to say an executive summary because it's still 12 pages, but certainly a summary of the bicentenary. I've talked about it on a number of occasions before, but this is an official report, if you like, to Council with some information about what happened, the number of productions that were in over the 5 weekends, over the 4 months that we ran the bicentennial. And I note that table it for my colleagues' interest.
Councillor Chong, thank you. And I'm sure I speak for all of us here to just once again acknowledge your enormous contribution, and that also of the Creative Director, Professor Noel Frankham, and the other many volunteers that made the 5 weekends in the Valley such an amazing success, and appropriately acknowledging the 200-year milestone for Richmond. It really was first class. So thank you to you and all members of your committee. Are there any other reports to table? Councillor Hunter.
Yes, I'd like to table the minutes from the Bicycle Advisory Working Group for a meeting that was held on Friday, March 8th.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Are there any other minutes to be tabled? There being none, we move now on to item 4.6, the weekly briefing reports. So we note that the weekly briefing reports of the 15th, the 22nd and the 29th of April 2024 have been circulated to councillors. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, on the 15th of April 2024, an update on the Southern Tasmanian Regional Land Use Strategy. On page 61, it refers to the state of play is intended to be provided to councils mid-year, followed by a public consultation period. What I find interesting is that on page 63, at the base of the page, the Southern Regional Tasmania has approximately 19 years of supply of residential land. Now, given that the southern region is made up of all those councils, including Sorell, Brighton, Hobart, Clarence and so on, I'm just wondering as to whether or not that statement is really correct, in the sense that I would have thought that, given Clarence's situation with residential land, that it's obviously a lot more than the combination of 19 for the whole of the southern region. Perhaps I can have some clarification on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor James. Mr Maher.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor James, for the question. Unfortunately, that's a production from the Southern Tasmanian Regional Land Use Strategy working group itself. So we don't make that claim. I don't have the information behind that claim. However, you are correct when you say it's looking at it from a regional basis. But I'm sorry, I can't furnish any more light on that statement.
Thank you, Mr Maher. Councillor James.
Thank you. On the 22nd of April, it refers to the removal of safety fencing on the Beach Road, Malana Road, roundabout. And it goes through the history of this, and I'm quite well aware of that. But on page 3, it says, amongst other things, that in the last paragraph, the report indicated that if a barrier were to be reinstated at this location, it recommended energy-absorbing bollards be used instead of a barrier, with horizontal welded rails. And that shows an example of energy-absorbing bollards. But the last sentence, it is not clear whether either of these recommendations were pursued further. So, given the decision of Council at the last meeting, and in light of that, there is a suggestion from the consultants that energy absorbing bollards be used instead of a barrier with horizontal welded rails, unquote. Is that a matter that would be considered as part of a report to council in relation to what would be an appropriate barrier energy absorbing bollards that may be brought forward as part of the report to council, please?
Thank you, Councillor James. Mr Graham, are you able to provide an answer, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor, as I wasn't at the last council meeting, but I understand notice motion was adopted in terms of this address, and we are looking at the design and the improvements of that intersection, and further advice will be brought to council as to what the recommendations are.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor James, anything further?
And finally, yes, on the 29th of April, Pier, excuse me, Bell Reef Pier notice of upcoming closure. It says, amongst other things, that the undertake works involving a connection of power and water services from the main supply in the car park. And it's going to take 2 days to complete the service trenching across the car park. As a result, there's going to be a reduction of available car parking spaces by approximately 6 to 8 spaces during the construction period. So my question is, that is a very busy car park, and this is presumably going to be at a busy time during the day. So is it intended to actually make available some of that all-day parking which is on Victoria Esplanade available, or some of those spaces to be available for persons to either go into the federal hotels to use the facilities or go into the Bell Reef Village and utilise some of those other business houses for whatever purposes? So my question is, in fact, are there alternative arrangements being made, given it's going to be 2 days closure and the loss of 6 to 8 spaces?
Thank you, Councillor James. I'll note that if we read on that paragraph that you've just referred to, Mr Graham writes that the car park has a 2-hour limit and is not expected to significantly inconvenience commuters. Yeah. However, we wish to assure you that we're taking all possible measures to minimise the disruption. So, Mr Graham, are you able to now provide an overview as to what those possible measures are, please?
Mr Mayor, you answered it perfectly. The works are intended to be finished tomorrow. We haven't made any other alternative arrangements. We've informed the nearby local businesses, and I'll provide an update to council and this week's briefing report confirming the works are complete.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor James, anything else? Colleagues, anyone else wish to raise any items from the weekly briefing reports? There being none, moving now, I note that we're at the end of our omnibus items. Can I please have a mover of the omnibus items? Councillor Hunter, seconded Councillor Goyne. All those in favour? Thank you. Moving now on to item number 5, public question time. There's a 5.1 public questions on notice. Ms Shannon Hurd is listed in the agenda. CEO, a response, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms Shannon Hurd of Bellreeve asked the following 3-part question. Please advise the following in as much detail as possible in relation to the AFL High Performance Centre survey, which was conducted at the 2023 Colour Run. Firstly, were the surveys completed on site on the day of the Colour Run event? Secondly, how many survey responses were received from participants of the Colour Run event? And thirdly, were survey responses from any source accepted after the survey closing date of the 7th of November 2024? And the answer to the first question is the Colour Run was an opportunity to promote the consultation and make people aware they could participate in the survey via Council's Your Say website. Hard copies of the survey were also made available, as well as access to the survey via a QR code. There is no available data indicating how many surveys were completed on site on the day of the event. Question 2, the answer is there is no data to indicate how many survey responses were from participants in the Colour Run event. And the answer to question 3 is yes, 5 surveys were received after the closing date.
Thank you, CEO. Moving now on to 5.3, answers to previous questions taken on notice. We'll take them as read. They're listed in the agenda. 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery? There being none. Name and suburb, please, Mr Marsh.
My name's Victor Marsh from Belrive. Were the Hand family consulted in the initial stages of the discussions about the destruction of Charles Hand Memorial Park?
Thank you for your question. CEO?
Thank you. I'll take that question on notice.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Marsh. Mr Figg, do you have a question?
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Always a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, yes. I'm no longer undercover, as you can see. My question is to do with public questions to council, whether it be formally or informally, is through the General Manager to whoever he wishes. What is the timeline of a response, a suitable response, to the questions raised by the public?
CEO, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to clarify the question. That's a question asked in the council meeting and taken on notice?
No, a question asked of council. So it may be in writing, may be a file that's sent to you and gets a registered number. So I'd like to know how long it takes to get a suitable answer.
Thank you. Okay, I'll give you an answer in two parts. If the question is asked in this forum in a council meeting, it will be answered in normal circumstances at the next council meeting if it's taken on notice. In terms of any correspondence we receive, our aim is to provide a response within 10 working days if that's possible, and if it's not possible, we will provide advice and updates as appropriate.
And Mr Figg, I'll just add to that too, anything that comes into my office within a 10-day, 2-week period, if there's not a response able to be provided by the officers, at least acknowledgement and an update is provided to a resident. And if ever that falls over that outside that window, I'm very happy to hear from any resident because we try to turn things around very quickly and professionally here.
I certainly appreciate that, Mr Mayor, and you will be hearing.
Thank you, Mr Figg. Are there any other questions from the gallery? Yes, sir. Thank you. Name and suburb, please.
My name is Peter Vonk, and I live on the corner of Alexandra Esplanade.
Mr Vonk, are you making a deputation this evening? I'm sorry to interrupt. I've got you listed as making a deputation. By all means, but questions are much shorter. Deputations, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I've got...
All right, so if there are no other questions from... Mr Vonk, just one moment. No other questions from the gallery. We can move now on to deputations. And Mr Vonk, you have 3 minutes to make your deputation. And in the interest of fairness, I will have to strictly enforce that. So the floor is yours, sir, for 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So can you start now?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Vonk.
Thank you, Mayor and Alderman of the Clarence City Council regarding traffic noise and excessive speed in Alexandra Esplanade, Belrive. On the 19th of February this year, I sent an email letter to the council outlining my concerns about vehicle traffic on Alexandra Esplanade. Specifically, excessive speed and noise of revving engines in the summer months. This on-road behavior is a clear safety issue for residents and visitors and disturbs residents in the late hours of the night. In Alexander Esplanade area, there are various traffic-generating activities which constitute an increased pedestrian risk. These include elderly residents, Clarence High School, and numerous road and car park intersections. I have a particular concern for the safety of young families with prams who cross Alexander Esplanade to access Belrive Beach. The design of Alexander Esplanade encourages traffic to speed. It is long and wide and a smooth service. An appropriate design approach would involve appropriate traffic calming measures. For example, speed bumps, carriageway narrowing, and road surface material variation. As the council is the local road authority, I request that it undertakes preparation of a detailed traffic management plan for the Alexander Esplanade area that incorporates suitable measures to improve traffic and pedestrian safety and improve the level of amenity for residents and other land users. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vonk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. CEO, are there any other deputies this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. There are two further deputies tonight. The first is Mr Paul Baker in respect to the development application for 23 Sabre Place.
Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding the development application for Lot 56 Sabre Place. My deposition is in opposition to the proposed development in its current form. Myself, I'm Paul Baker and I live at 5 Sabre Place, and this is my partner Ainsley Carlin. We live at Lot 55 Sabre Place, adjacent to the proposed development. Before purchasing Lot 55, I engaged a legal firm, Wallace, Wilkinson and Webster, to advise me of any unforeseen burdens over the property. And this is a letter from them, Wallace, Wilkinson and Webster. I'll read a paragraph from it. Could you please carefully read the schedule of easements and advise if you have any difficulties and concerns regarding the contents? They may interfere with or restrict your proposed use of the property. And then in brackets it says covenants or restrictions on what you may do on the property. One of the deciding factors why my partner and myself chose to live in this location and to make it our home was due to that covenant, which states the lot and surrounding and adjoining lots cannot be further subdivided, and that each lot shall be used only for a single family residence. The principle of the particular covenant that's over these particular lots is to maintain the character and integrity of the local environment. And I believe the proposed development would fail to maintain existing character and integrity of the local environment. And also between Lot 55, which is the lot that we reside on, and Lot 56, there's an easement that adjoins both lots of approximately 2 acres in area. The easement is to give the public access to the Tangara Trail and the South Arm Conservation Reserve. This easement is home to a small population of eastern barred bandicoots and eastern bedongs. Both eastern barred bandicoots and eastern bedongs are extinct in the wild on mainland Australia. In 2013 in Victoria, the Department of Primary Industries listed the eastern barred bandicoot extinct in the wild. Victoria spent more than $3 million on captive breeding programs and creating fenced fox and cat-free reserves. And I believe we need to retain and protect existing habitat here in Tasmania, or Tasmania's eastern barred bandicoots and eastern bedong population will go the same way as mainland Australia. And I believe the proposed development should have provisions included in it that retain and protect eastern barred bandicoot habitat. And we've also listed additional concerns in our submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Baker. Thank you very much. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our second deputation tonight is from Ms Fran Richards in respect to the same development application.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I'm Fran Richards and I'm from 35 Sabre Place, neighbouring the proposed development property. The first pages of the development application for this development contain the Clarence City Council's application for development form, where you need to sign a declaration which reads, "I've read the certificate of title and schedule of easements for the land and am satisfied that this application is not prevented by any restrictions, easements or covenants. And it goes on to say that I declare that the information in this declaration is true and correct. And this was signed by the applicant on the 25th of January this year. The next few pages of the development application contain the certificate of title, including the schedule of easements, where it says there is a covenant that's binding to 14 lots, including 23 Sabre Place, which are within this sealed plan of subdivision. It says the owner of the lot is to observe the following stipulations, which include not to use any building or structure placed on the lot other than as a single residence for one family only. So therefore, the applicant has either not read or understood the certificate of title or has made a false statement on the declaration, which is a criminal offence in Australia. There's a lot of fine print to read, and it's quite possible that this clause was overlooked. However, it's been pointed out to the council by several of the other lot owners in their representations who are party to this covenant that this preventative covenant exists. And given that declaring that there is no preventative covenant is an integral part of lodging an application, then the application should not have been accepted in the first place, and the proposal should not be assessed as approved. It makes a mockery of the declaration on the form and the process to approve this development. Just to clarify, there is no precedent for this covenant having been lifted for any other properties within the sealed plan to which it applies. 2 properties in the sealed plan have buildings classed as secondary residences which are compliant with the covenant. According to the planning scheme, a secondary resident must be associated with an existing residence and be no more than 60 square metres, for example, a granny flat. These are permitted as part of buildings erected as a single residence for one family only. No other lots in this sealed plan to which this covenant applies have buildings classed as visitor accommodation, which is a class for buildings being commercially used for visitor accommodation. And I understand the need to expedite the planning approval process and not have applications held up in red tape. The planning report glosses over a lot of valid points concerning our loss of amenity. But I feel that if the council vote to give this project the green light, this will give the developer confidence to continue the battle in court and prolong the mental and financial strain on everyone.
Thank you, Ms Richards. Thank you very much. I believe that's the end of our deputations now, and I advise that Council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on to item 7.1, which is a planning application for 1 South Terrace, Lauderdale, 2 multiple dwellings, 1 existing, 1 proposed. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Councillor James, thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hunter. It's not an easy task when we come and look at this particular issue, but there is history in relation to this, and it's also been summarised in the officer's report of when it went to the tribunal and a challenge in relation to the density of a particular development at the time, and that in fact was upheld by the tribunal, and subsequent to that it was taken a step further to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court at the time endorsed the tribunal's decision in relation to that. So what this is saying here in the actual recommendation is the proposal does not comply with 8.4.1p1 because it's not compatible with the density and the surrounding area, and it does not comply with 8.4.1p1 because the proposed does not provide for significant social and community benefit. Now that's a really interesting comment to be included in there, because it doesn't come, in my opinion, as a given, and it's only in certain circumstances that it's capsulated with the previous proposal, which was it does not comply because of the non-compatibility with the density of the area. So in this particular case, we do have a decision, and we don't necessarily have a decision from the tribunal where they have put in writing the reasons why at the time they decided or made that decision in relation to the density matter. Likewise, the Supreme Court, as I mentioned, a moment ago, that was actually endorsed at that higher level. So having said that, there is a lot of discussion in relation to that decision, but I think the officers haven't taken this lightly, and they have gone through in the attachments and covered different areas in relation to the density and those decisions of the Tribunal and the Supreme Court. I seek Council's support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Hunter.
I don't have much further to add. Thank you, Councillor James, for his comments, which I support, and I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, I'll put the motion. That is that that the planning application be refused. Moved by Councillor James, second by Councillor Hunter. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 7.2, which is planning application for 23 Sabre Place, Sandford, for visitor accommodation 2 units. And the recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions and advice. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Councillor Hume, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hunter, thank you. Councillor Hume.
Just very briefly, Mr Mayor, the development, the officers have gone into a great deal of detail as to why the development is compliant with the planning scheme, and the main objection to it, as we heard from the representations today, and I thank those residents for their deputations, is the existence of a restrictive covenant. I guess there's some contention by them over the question of whether that's a matter on which we should refuse the application. But my understanding is there are, in the state planning provisions, there are 2 mentions of covenants specifically in relation to conservation covenants in regards to vegetation. A covenant is a private law, well, as it states in the officer's report, a private law matter between the lot owners as parties to the sealed plan. So, in other words, it's not actually a planning matter, and therefore not something that we can take into account in determining this application. Having said that, it may be that the covenant, is a reason why the development can't go ahead, should the other lot owners choose to exercise their rights in common law, and under the Land Titles Act, which I understand is the relevant act that governs covenants. But as I said, it's not something that we can consider as a planning authority. So I believe the development complies with the planning scheme, and I urge Councillors' support.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a really tricky one. I know this site extremely well, and I'd like to thank the people who gave representations this evening who made very valid points, particularly around signing a declaration, saying that you have seen the land titles and you understand any covenants that might be there. And I do think it's interesting that we can accept a development application when we know that it's not necessarily accurate. However, I have asked the senior planner at length about this issue, particularly around the covenant. And I'm assured, and it was well explained to me, and I thank the senior planner for that, that if council is not privy to a covenant, then we have no authority to do anything about that when it comes to a development application, which is extremely unfortunate. However, I am assured that the neighbouring residents have a very good, strong case to take this to the Supreme Court, which I would recommend if we approve this evening, as we really have no other choice, because if we refused it, it wouldn't stand up in the tribunal and we would be spending valuable council funds to try to defend that, knowing it wouldn't have any legs. So it's unfortunate. I think we do need to approve this evening, but I hope that it makes its way to the Supreme Court and finds its ultimate outcome there.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and may I say from the outset I could pose a question through you to the planner and perhaps to Mr Brennan in his capacity as under the Manager of Regulations within this place. On page 57C, it says, I quote, "The proposed works are located within a mapped bushfire-prone area, and as such, a bushfire assessment and BAL, bushfire assessment, I think that is. Anyway, BAL must be provided by a suitably qualified person and form part of the certified documents for the building application." Firstly, to the city planner, is this it's in under category of advice, but should it be listed as a condition?
Thank you, Councillor James. And just a reminder, questions come to me. Okay, you don't direct them to staff. Thank you. Mr Marr.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor James, for the question. As we've discussed, the bushfire attack level is a matter that is required to be dealt with through the building application, through the National Construction Code and the Building Code of Australia. It's not, the planning scheme exempts it from consideration through the planning scheme, and so it's a matter that's dealt with through the building permit. Accordingly, its proper place is an advice through in this instance as opposed to a condition, because its enforcement wouldn't be part of a subsequent planning process.
Thank you, Mr Marr. Councillor James. Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to... Councillor Warren, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I also thank our deputies for their contributions this evening, which have been very informative. I too attended the briefing on Friday and learned that the covenant is not part of the planning scheme, therefore we can't vote on the basis of the covenant, and if we approve this application then it's the landowners, the adjacent landowners can then pursue that covenant in a different place. But surely we can take into account an application that contains a false declaration and therefore making that application invalid. So I now feel quite comfortable in rejecting this motion.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll speak very, very briefly because I'm essentially going to echo the comments of colleagues and endorse those, in fact, particularly Councillor Hume and Councillor Hunter. This is a tricky one. It is quite unpalatable in some ways for us as a planning authority to have to sit and adjudicate over something that we can see has problems, something that we can see will give rise to legal challenge, probably quite validly. Also thank the representatives for putting forward their contributions this evening. They're very pertinent and informative and, of course, very personal. I've been in another place where we attempted to address through legislation the capacity for people to deal with sealed plans that required people to in resolving disputes relating to those, go to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court, as we all know, is a very, very expensive place to go, no matter what you're going there to do. Starts putting lots of zeros on things, which makes it become very difficult for everyday people to resolve issues around defending their rights, those sorts of things. So I really wanted to just say I share my colleagues' sentiments, but I also want to just highlight the fact that the alternative is an expensive one, and I think that government needs to have a look at whether there's a way that these sorts of matters can be resolved in a less expensive forum. This is something state government should actually turn their attention to, because we have done it in the past. I was part of a process where we did close some loopholes that made people go to the Supreme Court when they shouldn't have to. This is one of these other examples where I can see something like this needs that sort of attention. But unfortunately, it's frustrating for us at this time. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Any other colleagues wishing to make... Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you. As we all know, we're sitting as a planning authority. we're working under the regulations and restrictions that form part of that scheme. And that has to come into the decision making, and that is also where we arrive at, the recommendations before us. If we were to step aside, I think most fair-minded people, if they are doing due diligence into a property and saw a covenant, would come to an understanding that it was a document that was enforceable, and I could understand very much how people might feel in the situation we've arrived at now. That is likely to be something that's going to have to be handled external to this, as previous contributors have made. I guess my only comment through you, Mayor, perhaps to the CEO, is are there examples of local government helping people in as much as giving resources or easy access to understand where something like the difference between one form of covenant versus the covenant that councils are involved in? I don't expect you to have an answer off the top of your head, but I guess I'm asking, is this an area where there is room for some visibility or something that could be put into processes when due diligence is to be had? Because I can understand how degrees of false confidence are arising.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. CEO, do you want to respond to that?
I think I'll take that on notice.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution to this matter? There being none, no. Councillor Hume might have replied.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I don't know if I can do this in right reply, but can I put a question to the head of planning?
No.
I didn't think so. No, okay. It's a shame because I did actually want to seek some advice over how, as a planning authority, we deal with that question of a false declaration. I guess we can't come to a conclusion as a planning authority of whether the declaration's false.
Thank you. There's a point of order. Excuse me, Councillor Hume. Councillor Mulder.
There's an assumption that the declaration was false. From what I can gather, the declaration says it was aware of the covenants, not that they would be necessarily negative to the proposal. So as a technical point of law, it is not a false declaration, and to say that it is,
thank you, Councillor
is
Mulder.
actually making an allegation that isn't supported by evidence.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we can't hear from the gallery. I'm sorry. Councillor Hume, that's a point of clarification. I think it's a point well made. Please continue with your...
Thank you, Mayor. And I didn't necessarily accept that the declaration was false. I was actually making the point that it's not for us to conclude whether or not it is as a planning authority, or I don't believe it is. So as I see, in terms of the provisions of the planning scheme, the development still complies.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Colleagues, I'll put the motion, which is a recommendation, that is that the planning application for 23 Sabre Place, Sanford, visit accommodation 2 units be approved, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Moving now on to item 7.3, which is local provision schedule amendment request for 10 Pindara Road, Tranmere. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor James. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and it's not often that we actually have one of these amendments to actually agree to prepare a draft amendment to rezone a lot. And in this particular case, it's 10 Bindara Road in Tranmere to general residential zone. On page 87, it's quite clear that this particular area that has been identified actually is almost an extension of what is already a general residential area. So, and it's my understanding that we have dealt with something like this in a previous term of this place, and that was to tie up some loose ends in relation to where a particular area of land, in this particular case, it's outside the general residential but abuts it, and therefore it makes a lot of sense for us as the planning authority to actually recommend, as has been put in the officer's report, for this to go on to into public advertising, and obviously that would then have to come back to council, subject to any changes that may be made as a result, and that at that time the council would make a decision as to whether or not any changes to that amendment would be accepted or rejected. And it would seem to me that this is a fairly straightforward instance, and therefore I don't think there would be, but then again we don't know exactly. But the beauty of this is, if we can say that on page 87, I quote, "There's no appeal process available to request for amendment if the planning authority refuses the initial request." And I continue, "The applicant may ask their commission to review the process leading to the decision, but not the merits of that decision." But in this particular case, we are endorsing that particular change or the process, and that would, I believe, really tidy up one area in particular in relation to the area in question, and that means that one would expect this to go through the appropriate channels and come back to us. So I seek council's support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, this obviously intends to correct what appears to be an anomalous zoning, where the zoning is split through a particular property. That makes very little sense for the people who live at 10 Bindara Road or want to do anything with it. So this process will actually seek to put that correct. I seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 7.4, which is a planning application for 312A Tranmere Road, Tranmere, a 16-lot subdivision plus balance, including new roadway, footway and public open space. I'll call for a move of the recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor. Well, you're on a roll, Councillor James. Thank you.
Pro-development.
Welcome back, Councillor Mulder. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Look, I'll be very brief, because in this particular case, it's something that we have become aware of in the discussions with Skylands and also during the course of the Druthi Point Special Area Plan, which was superseded by the decision this council made in relation to the Carr subdivision. But nevertheless, this is an integral part of the development that has been in the pipeline and was, in my understanding, part of the process that was put forward as in the actual Druthi Point Special Area Plan that this place, the niche consultants, did for us some 5-6 years ago. So in other words, this particular process is really coming to a situation where we need to do something about it, and that is to basically, and I seek council support, to endorse it, because it leads to this part of the process which has been going on for so many years, if you say that, and therefore we need to tick the box and allow this staging to start. And having said that, I was against the Skylands, and I had my good reasons for that, but this particular development, as I said earlier, has been on the books for a number of years. It was part of the niche consultant plan that this council commissioned some years ago, as I said, and therefore it's tying up loose ends, and I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Deputy Mayor.
Just as
per the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, I'll put the motion. That is that the planning application be approved subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 7.5, which is a planning application for 1 Kelson Place Acton Park, additions and alterations for a single dwelling. Recommendation is that it be approved subject to conditions and standard advice. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor Hume. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kennedy. Thank you. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So this is a application where I understand the applicants wanted to create multiple dwellings but were unable to do so under the provisions of the scheme. I think they've tried their best to format it in a way that makes it in practice a multiple dwelling, while at the same time the officers have placed conditions that are restricted in a way where technically it is a single dwelling. And part of that is the condition on removing the kitchen and laundry. So in essence, I believe that technically it is a single dwelling and therefore compliant with those provisions of the scheme.
Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very briefly, being familiar with this property, I take comfort in the conditions that have been included in the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, I'll put the motion. That is for approval. Councillor, we have to be a bit quicker. Councillor Warren.
She did.
I didn't see you. Come on.
You need to be more observant then, Mr.
I went around the horseshoe. Anyway, Councillor, the floor is yours.
I just wanted to say that, yes, this does comply with the planning scheme. The applicants have done their best to fit in with the planning scheme, and if in the future we should see a change of use application, we can't take that into account in our decision tonight.
Councillor Warren. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution to this item? There being none, I put the motion, that is, it be approved subject to conditions and standard advice. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Colleagues, thank you very much. I now advise that Council now concludes its deliberations as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, and move now on to item nothing under 8.1, 8.2 or 8.3, moving on to 8.4 of governance. 8.4.1, the Waste and Resource Recovery Services Policy of 2024. The recommendation is that Council endorses the Waste and Resources Recovery Policy of 2024. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Councillor Hunter, is there a seconder? Councillor Kennedy, thank you. Councillor Hunter.
I'd like to thank the officers for putting this policy together. I think it's quite sound. It's more modern than what we had previously, and I think it contains everything that it should after reading it in detail. So I seek colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Kennedy. Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, thank you.
Yes, I thank staff for the compilation of this this policy. And again, though, I would note it's a policy; it's not law. As and when our priorities change, or alter, or if indeed, as per the previous council, the hard waste progresses ahead, then we're not going to get caught out on technicalities. But this is an area that we want to evolve with, and policy is a good way to start that.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution to this item 8.4.1? There being none, Councillor Hunter.
Nothing further.
Okay, I'll put the motion. That is that we endorse the Waste and Resources Recovery Policy 2024. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to item 9, which is motions on notice. The first one being 9.1, which is notice of motion standing in the name of Councillor Mulder for AFL Tasmania High Performance Centre. It's seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mulder.
Mayor, I move the motion in my name.
Thank you. It's been seconded. The floor is yours. Thank you, Councillor Mulder.
Mr Mayor, let's get this clear. This motion is about whether the High Performance Centre, which this council has previously agreed should be on one site or on two. There was a lot of work about saving our parks and a lot of community angst about the destruction of our parks. Indeed, as some have said, the bulldozing of parks. But the old golf course is not parkland. It's a recreation area that for over 100 years, I believe, has been used to supply the sport of golf. What we have now is a proposal that it be used to support the sport of AFL football. The reality is that Parklands is only a name pending finalisation of the City Heart Plan. It has never been declared a park. Actually, it's just a disused sporting precinct. Be clear, if you don't support AFL, High Performance Centre, in Clarence, then of course vote no. But then you've got the previous decision. If you do support an a High Performance Centre and want to save the real park in this mixture, namely Charles Hand Park, then you support this motion because that will save the park. Our status or our situation at this point is that council has been chosen as the HP as the High Performance Centre site, and council has supported a combined site of the old golf course plus Charles Hand Park. Council has authorised the CEO to negotiate a heads of agreement to use both Charles Hand Park and the old golf course. But given the consultation about the High Performance Centre did not even mention Charles Hand Park, it's not surprising that the community is alarmed at the loss of parkland, and so it should be. And the fact that there was no information about which parts of the parkland, which parts were going to be used for what, how much was going to be, where buildings and ovals and other facilities were to be sited, has led to the situation where the community has rushed in and assumed that we're going to bulldoze a lot of it and pave it with tar and cement. The AFL has never asked for Charles Hand Park. And from my understanding, it's not even their preferred option. It's certainly not the one they were talking about when they came to me and other councillors. But the leader of the opposition, the Labor Party, has now supports the stadium. But behind the scenes is busy trying to secure the High Performance Centre for his hometown of Kingston. The AFL preference is for the High Performance Centre to be located close to both the stadium and the High Performance Centre and the local CBD. They have learned their lessons of Waverley Park, which was posted out in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne and struggled for 15 years. Sure, there was plenty of attendance, but they woke up to it, and then they went for the covered stadium at Docklands, which has actually revitalised a long stagnant part of the Melbourne CBD on the Western Corridor. This is now a thriving activity with housing aplenty and a lot of economic activity in what was once, as I said, stagnant area. And this will do the same for the Clarence, for the CBD of Rosny. Make no mistake, we can save Charles Hand Park, and we can have a stadium, and we can have a high performance centre. Not to support this is likely to lose the high performance centre and its economic benefit. Docklands revitalised it, and the High Performance Centre, located near the Rosny CBD, will do the same for the Rosny CBD. This is a win-win. It's a win for Parklands because we will retain it. It's a win for it's a win because it's an economic boost of the $60 million odd, and guess what? It'll be more by the time it's finished, of non-ratepayers' money. This is a negotiated compromise that can achieve both. And my real concern is that given the public outcry about the thing.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm really pleased to be able to rise and support the motion that's been put forward by Councillor Mulder, and as many of you would probably be aware, this motion being put forward is in fact probably more close to my preferred position from the outset in respect of securing the HPC in Clarence, because I've always preferred minimising or eliminating, in fact, any impact on Charles Hand Park and the Rosny College side of Rosny Hill. It's important to me, and I've always thought that the prospect of activating what is a former golf course and prior to that a former farm actually made a lot of sense. And Councillor Mulder touched on this issue of attributing a characteristic to an area that has never been a parklands. We have to be really careful in remembering this, because for over 100 years it was a golf course, and before that it was extensive farming area. It's never been a parklands, and so I think that unfortunately has conjured up views in the community about people who probably don't even go there, about what it actually is we're doing and where we're doing it. So I think, you know, that's been an unfortunate part of this. Charles Hand Park, however, of course, is different, does have a different status, and I'd always had the position that if that could be, we could eliminate or minimise the impact on that particular part, that would be a great thing. However, I don't want to find us in a position where we're actually settling for 100% of nothing down the track. I'd actually, sometimes it's the art of the possible. Sometimes you have to compromise to get something that's not everything you might want, but you know that overall it's going to be better for the city, better for our community, better for our business, you know, and economic indicators, all of those things. And I know how difficult the decision was, in fact, to close the golf course back in 2021, for those of you that were here. Criticised for not consulting. I've read some of the media, I went back and watched some of the footage of the meetings that were held at that time. The same sorts of arguments. You know, people weren't consulted, people disappointed, but there's a very minimal amount of things that can actually be done on the land because of the condition that's intituled on the land from the Crown. There are very few things that we can actually do with that particular piece of land. And personally, I'm very comfortable with advocating that this land continues to be proffered forward as an option for sport and recreational pursuits that also has the capacity to continue to provide public open space in addition to that. It's really important that we keep putting our best foot forward to maximise our opportunity to secure the HPC in Clarence, because I feel that it can be, as Councillor Mulder has said quite articulately in his contribution, this can be a win-win across all of those particular KPIs. So I'm really pleased to see this come forward. I think it strengthens our position moving forward in negotiations, and I thank Councillor Mulder for bringing it to Council and seek colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This motion is an odd one because if successful, it will offer the AFL and DSG an option they first approached us about, then went cold on after just a modicum of due diligence because, physics maybe. And the first rhetorical question I pose is, does the tabling of this motion on the agenda increase or decrease confidence and certainty in Council for DSG and the AFL? And the second rhetorical question, does the motion give the community more or less clarity about Council's position on the High Performance Centre? Good councils and strong councils take an honest broker approach. A High Performance Centre is an amazing opportunity that could be truly transformative. But in dealing with big corporations like the AFL, good and strong councils negotiate on the basis of finding out what the other parties need rather than just doing what they say they want. After all, we should know the area and the community better than they do. And the predicament facing Council was, well, entirely predictable. I was first on my feet on the night that Council passed the 7-5 both sites option. but didn't get the call. My alternate motion would have given the AFL everything they needed in Rosny and almost all of what they wanted. Back then, it could possibly have passed by 11-1. Not now, but then. And I would have taken all the heat for that decision, willingly, if it got us a high-performance centre and preserved the parklands for future generations. I would have accepted the price of being punted into obscurity. That night, some folks around the horseshoe were needlessly spooked by Kingborough's bid. I suggest it was a faux competitive tension and should have been seen as such by all. Not that the Twin Ovals is a poor site, it's got great infrastructure, but as per the approach by DSG to this council, Rosny is where they wanted to be. And it was wanted primarily, I guess, for proximity to Macquarie Point. But I'd suggest now the landscape has changed markedly. ABC Tasmania's grandstand with Chris Rowbottom last Saturday was once again must listening for local government, particularly on the topic of grandstands, or should I say high performance centres, when he interviewed Grant O'Brien. I'm slightly paraphrasing him here where he says, more pressing and immediate matter might be the high performance centre at Rosny, a chosen location split over 2 parcels of land, the park and the former golf course, noting community opposition, the 1,000 signature petition, environmental queries and engineering challenges. Now this is a direct quote of a question Rowbottom put to O'Brien. There were other options for this facility. Are you still 100% confident that the club and the government went the right way with Rosny? In the ensuing discussion, which went for a couple of minutes, O'Brien did not say no, but I've re-listened and I don't think I can hear him give a specific yes to a very clear and straightforward question. And that overlays with the recent move of the basketball high performance centre slated for Glenorchy, but now earmarked for Kingborough, next to the Twin Ovals. I suggest the Twin Ovals now be getting another look over. And given Council's history of blocking amazing projects like Skyland's proposal with 20% public open space, knocking back a high-calibre hotel design for Kangaroo Bay last year, well, I'd be nervous if I was the High Performance Centre project manager given our track record. And boy howdy, won't the finger-pointing, or festival of finger-pointing rather, be spectacular if that proposal to take it from us is successful. Again, the best insight I had on Cricket Tasmania's position and their long-term aspirations for Blunston Arena was an interview with the CEO on, you guessed it, Tasmanian Grandstand with Chris Rowbottom. And I don't want Blunston Arena becoming a stranded asset, but here's the facts. Cricket Tasmania want to move. We should be having an urgent and serious discussion with DSG, the AFL and Cricket Tasmania. It's the perfect spot for the AFL High Performance Centre with the most of the infrastructure already in place and a change of use that would be welcomed by community. So, again, we have largely got into this place by how we handle this matter, and we are now where we are. The salvation is Blunston Arena if we get our act together and go fast. But otherwise, we might need to change our slogan to a place where bold ideas come to die.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And thank you everyone for their comments thus far and their contributions. As you all know, I didn't support this proposal even going out to community consultation. I didn't support it again in December when it came back to us. However, I think our role as councillors, I very much respect that and the organisation, and I respect the votes that we make in this chamber. Therefore, I've turned my focus into ensuring that the community gets the most benefit out of a high performance centre, which we have approved to go ahead. Now, a colleague and myself recently went to Melbourne to look at high performance centres, and that made me realise even more that the Rosny Parklands site is not a great site, and that the location of Charles Hand Park is much more suitable, in my view, based on what I've seen. And that's comparing, say, Carlton, which is in Royal Park, versus North Melbourne, which is in the middle of an industrial residential area. They were very different, and the one located in the industrial residential area had much more community benefit, where residents could come and go as they pleased. The YMCA ran half of the facility for recreational purposes, and it was very much entwined with the community. Now, in contrast to Carlton, which is in the middle of a park, similar to, say, Rosny Parklands, and it was very closed off. You had people kind of recreating, using the park, but there was no interaction with the facility. So for me, that just reiterated that if we are to build this facility here, it's much more suitable in Charles Hand Park, where there's already development surrounding that, as opposed to what used to be a golf course, but that's what makes it great. There is no development there, and I think that as density continues to occur, we should leave that place free of development. And the community benefit that the Charles Hand Park site could offer is much greater, with the college being located there and other recreational facilities. I find it interesting that everyone's focused on saving Charles Hand Park. Why aren't they trying to save the parklands? I don't think that the community understands that in the City Heart Plan, Charles Hand Park was actually earmarked for social housing. So there's going to be development there either way. I think we should continue to save Rosny Parklands free of development, if anything, and continue to try to get the most community benefit as we can out of the Charles Hand Park location.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Warren.
Thank you. Yeah, I find this motion a little confusing and a bit surprised to see it on our agenda, particularly given the CEO's comments and my recollections that the former Rosny Golf Course is totally impractical and was not a choice of the AFL and DSG and would be very difficult to build on. I guess one of the things that has come out of this whole debate, and it's certainly caused a huge amount of division in the community, is that what we've discovered is the community's love for the City Heart Plan. Who knew? And their huge appreciation of the excellent communication and consultation that they were able to take part in. And they felt they were contributing to the future of their environment. So as part of that City Heart Plan, let me remind you that the Rosny Golf Course, which we started referring to as the Parklands, was to become home to a number of recreational facilities, including a wild park, a children's park, an open air space where performances could take place, tracks and trails. There were a number of plans, and the community loved this. They really were on board. And one of the main comments that has come back has been the community's absolute disappointment that that might not happen. So that was the vision for the Rosny Parklands, and that has been a huge concern. Now, I voted against the previous proposal, which was using part of that and part of Charles Hand. If I'd had a choice, I would have voted against none of it, because I'm fully in favour of an AFL high performance centre, but like many of our community, just not there. And given the difficulty of building on these two sites, Rosny Parklands, the former golf course, being far more difficult to build on, we know that the state government can acquire land, when they need to, and I'm sure that the cost of building in that location would easily equal the cost of acquiring some more suitable land. And we know that there are other parcels of land like Gilston May, or Bayview College, which would be really easy, flat, easy to build ovals on. My recollection of the discussion with the AFL was quite different to Councillor Mulder's, in that the AFL did in fact go cold on that proposition and were not keen on using the whole of the golf course because of that difficulty of slope and incline, which would result in a huge amount of cut and fill, and I think something like 10 or 20 metre retaining walls. I was interested to hear Councillor Ritchie refer to the Clarence CBD as stagnant. I don't think it is. I think it's a thriving, bustling CBD which doesn't need anything else to add to it. It's always very busy.
Point of order.
Point of order. I would like to ask Councillor Warren, I didn't actually say that at all. I'm just wondering what you're referencing. I don't recall saying anything about the CBD being stagnant at any point.
Or stagnate, perhaps,
No.
was your wording? No,
I think we just withdraw that comment, Councillor.
I'm happy to withdraw and check the record.
Thank you.
So that's
Okay,
withdrawn.
but
Thank you.
I wrote it down here as you said it, so apologies if I misheard that. I'll go back to some of the things that I said in the previous debate, and I did receive a letter, we probably all did today, from a resident which actually says a lot of the things that I would like to say, including not anti-football, not anti-Tasmanian AFL team, they're precious to many. However, the location of the preferred sites for training is, in the opinion of many people, including devout football followers, not the best location. So, you know, again, we all understand the importance of green space for mental health. We understand that as we densify our city centre, that green space becomes even more important. We also understand the impact of climate change and that we are spending good ratepayers' money at the moment on assessing the tree canopy in Clarence and working out how we can extend that, how we can increase the tree canopy. And yet here we are contemplating destroying something like 200 mature trees. It makes no sense. So to finish, yes, AFL Tasmanian team, and I'm reading from this letter, yes, training venue, no to the destruction and location of the AFL High Performance Centre in Charles Hand Park and Rosny Parklands.
Thank you. Councillor Goyne.
I'd like to thank Councillor Mulder for bringing forward this motion because, again, opening conversation, and the issue that we keep coming up with this is that there wasn't enough conversation in regards to this topic. The next thing that I'm going to add is going to scare even me as the anti-government conspiracy theorist at the table. I actually like to think that I have a little bit of faith in the government that they might try and do the right thing, put it in the right place, cut down the least amount of trees, make the community happy, do what's best for the infrastructure, do probably what costs them the least to do the best for the infrastructure. So I don't really understand why we're having this conversation because, as Councillor Warren just mentioned, you know, the government has the capacity to take the land anyway. So I would like to envision that the government that I don't trust will continue to liaise with the community to do the right thing for the community so that we can be satisfied that we have the High Performance Centre in our city in the best possible location. So however that may play out over the months and years that this will be ongoing and hopefully continue to be conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Goyne. That was put very well. I haven't anything prepared, and I keep going back to, you know, everyone is an expert on this topic. It's probably time now that we started listening to the experts. There's no doubt that there's lots of people that have a variety of opinions, and for all those the correspondence we've received from people not wanting Charles Hand, not wanting the parklands, I've had an overwhelming amount, and maybe it's just me, I don't know, but I get a lot of texts too from people that are saying, you know, you were one of those people that sat around the table with some of the people that are here now that fought to save the sports precinct that we knew as Rosny Golf Course. That's what it was. To a lot of people out there, it seems the logical place to replace it with another sporting precinct. Now, I, like Councillor Goyne, would like to believe that the government is going to ensure they're stumping up the money, that this goes in the right place at the right time, and we then, as a council, will have some significant funds put into this community that will allow us to do a whole lot more. And I defy anyone to go into any business around Clarence and say that they're actually thriving at the moment. That's not what I'm hearing. So I will be supporting this motion.
Councillor Darko, please.
Thank you. I would like to start by saying that the parklands, as outlined in the City Heart Plan, would be of immense value to the people of our municipality. And I don't think that some training grounds for the AFL even begins to compare to the value of those parklands. When I was talking to voters during the election, those on the door that mentioned this development said that the timeline for consultation was way too short and we had our hands tied by the AFL. So I put it to the people around this table that perhaps we should have pushed back. Perhaps we should have said they were asking too much. They were pushing us too hard. They were presuming too much. And if they really wanted things, they should have been willing to negotiate more instead of trying to force our hand. And since then, I've still had next to no correspondence in support of the High Performance Centre, so I suspect, Councillor Kennedy, that our respective demographics mailing us might be quite different. It's my view that we must not allow either of those parklands to be seized by this private company and that public land should remain for public use. I urge people around the table, councillors, to think of the parklands and what they could be. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and may I say from the outset that I really believe this motion is inappropriate, but nevertheless it's been moved and seconded, and the mover and seconder supported the decision in December last year, and now those mover and seconded have basically done a bit of a about turn on this issue and decided that it would be better to have both ovals on the Rosny Parklands, the ex-golf course. I just can't for the like of me understand why we are going through this process again. Okay, there is some scope from some individuals and from some members of the community to have the AFL High Performance Centre either on the Rosny Parklands or on the Charles Hand Park. But the community is steadfastly opposed to this, even though we've had that survey done and there was a number of people that responded accordingly and so on and so forth. And the May the 15th meeting is going to be a very interesting one because a lot of those persons who will be there will be standing up and saying, why weren't we consulted on a council-wide basis, because this particular decision is such of importance that it would require $130,000 worth of postage and media and so on and so forth time to be spent, because this particular issue is such of importance to the community as I see it. The fact of the matter is that the decision that was made was the wrong decision in December last year, and this decision is making it worse because we've already heard and note from the Chief Executive Officer's report that there are all sorts of issues, geotechnical, natural values and hydrology in relation to this. It would require extensive bulldozing, a huge amount of infill to bring it up to two ovals. And let's put it this way, it's public open space, it belongs to the community, and the community ought to have the right to be able to exercise and enjoy that for health and for recreation matters. If the two ovals are put there, then there's going to be constraints imposed upon the community because the primary oval has the infrastructure, and that will be closed basically to the public, because that needs to be closed to the public because it is for that high performance centre and for the players and also the coaches and also the physiotherapists and so on and so forth. So there is that particular part of it that's closed to the public. and if the other oval is built in that location, then it's going to put further constraints on what people can use and how they can enjoy it, how they have been able to enjoy it for over 100 years. Even though the golf course was still open, it still was public open space by the very nature of the term. So look, we really don't need to go down this path. It's going to create more problems than what we have already experienced in the December decision. And we really do not need to do this. And by saying you're going to keep Charles Hand free or not be developed, it basically still enables the community to feel that they are being disenfranchised as far as what they can use as far as Rosny Parklands. I seek council to vote against this, and in the spirit of what the community have said, and that letter that Councillor Warren read, we all received a copy of that today. I specifically came in to the council to pick that to read that letter because we were advised that there was a letter, and that does sum it up. It sums it up to the T, and that particular letter and that person who wrote it really wants to save the parklands for the community to enjoy it, as well as Charles Hand Park. I will not be supporting this motion.
Councillor Chong.
Mr Mayor. Look, I came into the meeting tonight undecided about how I was going to vote. And the reason for my lack of conviction, if you like, is some of the things that have been mentioned by my colleagues. So I do have an issue with the fact that the previous work that was looked at Rosny Parklands suggests it is a completely impractical site in both geotechnical, the severe rock underneath it, we'd need big retaining walls, all of those kind of things, which makes it also financially unviable. I also have a problem with the fact that a lot of the things that we and people loved in the city heart were around the Rosny farm, were extensions of the things there, were the wild park further down. And if we add all of the AFL High Performance Centre into Rosny Parklands, that actually we run the risk of losing some of those things because we don't have capacity for all of it in the parklands. So however you slice and dice this, we're actually taking away from the community if we do this. I really support having the High Performance Centre here, and I understand why it wants to be in Rosny. That yes, there are potentially other places, but the reality of what the AFL and the state government want in a High Performance Centre doesn't fit with putting it in Gilson Bay, doesn't fit with putting it at Bayview. And I don't necessarily agree with their reasons, but I understand their reasons and I understand why they want it here. But I don't know. I'd love to hear a really good reason in the summing up to convince me that supporting this is a good idea, but I'm struggling.
Councillor Hume, thank you.
Like Councillor Chong, I was also undecided on how I'm going to vote on this motion at the beginning of the debate, and I'm still struggling with it right now. For a number of reasons, as has been outlined in the advice that we've received and that I also mentioned in my opinion piece in the Mercury, I believe that the decision that Council originally made was the best one in terms of, and I understand, Councillor Mulder's contention about this is what these spaces did previously. Rosny Parklands was a sporting precinct. Charles Hand Park is a park, a recreational, passive recreational space. Therefore, it makes sense to have this configuration of the two ovals in what was previously a sporting precinct. But in terms of how we go ahead, I'm more interested not in what things were, but what they have the potential to do. I think that the Parklands has far more potential in terms of uses, public open space and being developed for recreational purposes. And I also concur with Councillor Hunter's comments about locating a facility, part of the facility in Charles Ham Park, creates those opportunities for synergies, for partnerships with some of the local stakeholders, such as the cricket club, such as the tennis club, and such as Rosny College. Councillor Hunter mentioned the tour that we went on. I also went on to look at some more facilities in Brisbane. Unfortunately, Councillor Hunter wasn't able to join us for that part of the trip. But all those visits in both Melbourne and Brisbane really opened my eyes to the possibilities. It strengthened my view that it's really important that we manage to obtain this facility in Clarence and that we have this facility. As Councillor Hunter said, there were some facilities that are rather closed off and don't have those community connections, but there are a lot of facilities that do and have fantastic examples of community benefits. And I think that given the leverage Council has in putting this forward and negotiating the heads of agreement, I think we have significant leverage to be able to create those community connections. We have the contacts. We can encourage and push the government to develop facilities that have flexible uses and that the community can enjoy through various programs. So it's important to me that we obtain the facility. I guess I'd like to pose a question, and I guess my vote very much hinges on the answer to this question, and that is if this motion passes, does and I noticed the word additional in terms of the submission, does this keep the option of Charles Ham Park and Rosny Parklands open should the Department of State Growth and AFL Club consider that to be the most suitable? Or is this saying that we're putting all our eggs in the Rosny Parklands basket?
Well, that is certainly my strict reading of the motion. That is that it provides an additional option. It says submit an additional proposal for the AFL High Performance Centre to be located entirely on the site of the former golf course. So there's already options A and B, if you like. This is C, but Councillor Mulder, I will pose a question to you as it's your motion. Is that your intent?
Mayor, I was going to address this in the reply, but this is not rescinding the previous motion.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you. Councillor Hume, does that answer your question?
Thank you. It does, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Mulder. Look, on that basis, I will support the motion on the basis that I consider it, while I prefer the proposal that we supported on the 11th of December, it's really important to me that we secure this project, and that if there turns out to be an issue with Charles Ham Park that the department decides to abandon it for whatever reason, that we keep our options open. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Colleagues, I wasn't going to participate in the debate this evening, but I will now as councillor, and you can't chair the meeting because you actually seconded the motion. So I will speak as a councillor, as I'm able to do. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor. But just to briefly say that, as we all know, next Wednesday of next week there's a public meeting regarding the and associated issues with the High Performance Centre in our city. From my perspective, as we've just clarified a moment ago, this provides just another option. We're talking about a $70 million investment that will deliver social and economic benefits to this city that we have never seen before. Is there an ideal position? Will we all agree on the site of the AFL High Performance Centre? No, we won't. We won't, nor will our community. But it's our turn and it's our responsibility to step up and to lead whilst always listening to our community by all means. But this provides yet another option. And none of us here are experts. With all due respect to all my colleagues, from a geotechnical perspective, we know that there are challenges from a flora and fauna perspective. We know that there will be challenges no matter where this centre is to be sited in our city. But from my perspective, it is absolutely essential. It will be game-changing for our city. And let there be no doubt that from my perspective, Clarence deserves this high-performance centre. At the moment, the AFL and the government are keen to site the AFL High Performance Centre here. I commend Alderman Mulder on bringing this motion this evening because it provides yet another option, if you like, option C, so that nothing is off the table and the experts can then come back and negotiate in good faith the heads of agreement with the CEO and council, obviously, because at the end of the day, the final decision rests with us. But as Councillor Mulder alluded to in his opening remarks this evening, if we were to lose this to Kingborough, that would be a very dark day for this city. Councillor Mulder, your right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your contributions. As I was going to say in the right of reply, but I'll reiterate it now, despite giving the opportunity beforehand. This is not rescinding the previous motion. This is just providing an opportunity, another option that might very well save Charles Hand Park, which is what the community are crying out for. If that doesn't, if this motion or the idea of locating it all doesn't suit the Department of State Growth or the AFL, then it won't happen, and Charles Hand Park is doomed. Is that what you want? The next point was raised was that, this is going to be closure of the grounds and the gated. The AFL and the Department of State Growth and the community have made it absolutely clear there will be no fences around these ovals. They will not be locked off. They will only be reserved for the AFL and those sorts of places at the times that they are actually using them for training purposes. The rest of the time, feel free to walk your dogs up and hopefully clean up after them, but the rest of the time. There are a few furphies about cutting down the trees. Sorry, the same amount of trees will be cut down if we use both sites as will be used if we only use one, because it's open parkland and trees. And by the way, both are cursed with radiata pine trees up through the middle, and I'm the first one that would put a chainsaw and replace them with some decent trees like blackwoods that provide shade, that provide, so that the trees thing is. If as a result of this motion, I can say this straight out now, the AFL, but as a result of this motion, if we lose the high performance centres, then it's on our head. If we lose Charles Hand Park, then it's on your head as well. So these are the options. We are putting an option forward. If, as has been contended here, and I will dispute what's been said at this table, if the AFL don't want to locate it entirely on Charles Hand Park, then they won't do it. But that's contrary to what I heard as late as this afternoon. And then if the Department of State Growth don't want to take out Charles Hand Park, then they will use that as a wonderful excuse to slip it down and appease the Leader of the Opposition, who today has backflipped on the stadium, and in the same breath has tried to become the sporting capital. The AFL is, and the questions about stagnation was actually my comment, and it was about the Melbourne CBD, not about the Rosny CBD.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Colleagues, I'll put the motion, saying in the name of Councillor Mulder. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to item 9.2, notice of motion seeing the name of the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very pleased to be able to put forward this motion for the consideration of colleagues this evening. The motion, if its intention is understood correctly, is actually about possibility. And I say this because there are yet any number of details to be forthcoming in terms of the guidelines for Stream 2 of the federally funded housing support program. What this motion is about is an effort to recognise that we have a long-running infrastructure issue relating to Central Lauderdale, the resolution of which has been openly stated as being beyond Council's capacity to resolve. The area in question consists of about 56 hectares of land, which I understand is made up of 31 freehold titles, all currently zoned rural living. On the 2nd of May 2017, former Mayor Doug Chipman is reported as saying that the Lauderdale Urban Feasibility Study report found, and I quote, that urban expansion was not financially viable. And of course, integral to this decision was the fact that Council had an inability to fund what was then estimated to be an $11 million infrastructure cost, which quite reasonably so that Council would say that, and the cost probably would reasonably be estimated today to be something around $20 million. In Tasmania, there are, of course, several pieces of legislation, policy and regulations that are relevant to storm water system management, which is a big issue in this particular area, and specifically the objectives of the Urban Drainage Act 2013 are to protect people and property by ensuring that stormwater services, infrastructure and planning are provided so as to minimise the risk of urban flooding due to stormwater flows, and to provide the safe, environmentally responsible, efficient and sustainable provision of stormwater services in accordance with the Act. The Act also requires Tasmanian councils to develop stormwater system management plans, or SSMPs, for the urban areas within their municipalities, and they must specify plans for the management of any assets used for the delivery of stormwater services, the level of risk from flooding for each urban stormwater catchment in the public stormwater system, and any other matters prescribed in the regulations or that Council deems appropriate to consider. Clarence City Council is responsible for management of the stormwater system located in Central Lauderdale, and we're currently operating under the Clarence Stormwater System Management Plan that was adopted in 2019. And I note that it's generally considered best practice that these documents be considered as living documents, and that they're periodically updated, hopefully every 4 to 5 years, which is sort of roughly where we're heading to in this space now, to respond to changing catchment conditions, knowledge of future flood events, industry advancements, technological advancements, community attitudes, and funding availability. Now, this is important because while there are engineering challenges that need to be overcome that are mentioned in the reports about this area, it's been put forward that a project such as this can be engineered to work sustainably, flora and fauna constraints are able to be managed, and the area is in an area that has good access to existing services and facilities. There are about 2,500 people already living in Lauderdale in an area where there's inadequate stormwater and flood management infrastructure. Making efforts to address these facts remain an important issue, regardless of any future rezoning prospects for Central Lauderdale. But this being said, it's estimated that a yield of around 583 lots could potentially be unlocked with the relevant infrastructure issues addressed. And while all the aspects of the engineering and planning will take their own course in line with the applicable processes, it's the funding availability that is and will continue to be a sticking point for Central Lauderdale and the management of stormwater and associated infrastructure. So it's important for Council to seek opportunities, particularly state and federal grant funding opportunities, to attempt to resolve infrastructure and appropriate future housing opportunities for our city that we know we can't do alone. And I noticed the catchphrase in one of the titles of the many reports that relate to this area talks about the power of commitment. And I think it's commitment that we need to see here, a commitment to work towards possible solutions in partnership with others, because this issue has been so long running, and we really can't continue to consign this to the too hard basket and leave it on the never never. So this motion, whilst it completely leaves the door open for other projects to be considered, it's deliberately flexible because we don't know whether we'll be in or out when the guidelines do come out, but it's just saying, let's put our hand up. I seek support from colleagues.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Moulton, seconder, please.
Yes, Mr Mayor. This is one of those things, and we can get very quickly sidetracked about the interesting history of what has been termed Central Lauderdale, although I noticed the word BD hasn't been used in there. This is about a government grant program which is designed about housing and all the rest of it. And this is an area that is completely encircled by an urban growth by the urban growth boundary, and there's an island in the middle of it. And it's an island in the middle of it because of the drainage issues. We've had cracks about this drainage issue for a long time. And in 2021, in the previous council, as a motion of this council, which was supported by my colleagues, we had the existing report, which was all about how big the outflow needs to be, and the 10 odd to 20 million, and probably by the time it's all done, 30 or 40 million dollars to dig a hole and put new holes under South Arm Highway to allow more water to flow out. And along comes a developer with a proposal on North Terrace to actually create the outfall into the Lauderdale Canal exactly 750 millimetres higher than the current outfall. The current outfall today at current sea levels is not an outflow at high tide, it is an ingress where seawater flows back into the lower areas of the canal. Imagine what that's going to be like, as per the reports that we've all seen, when sea level rises by 900 millimetres in 75 years' time. Those ingresses will be permanently ingresses, and what we call Central Lauderdale today will probably qualify as a Ramsar wetlands, saltwater wetlands site. We won't do what Werribee did to their site. So this is an issue about getting some government funding to go and have a look at the proposal. And what isn't mentioned is that the proposal to use the Lauderdale Canal is actually going to be funded by the developers, not the ratepayers. So they are sacrificing 3 lots, I think, on North Terrace in order to build a canal with an outfall that is 750 millimetres above the current outfall, which is basically inadequate no matter how big you make it. So the solution to this is that, well, 750 millimetres is less than the predicted 900 millimetres. So that's the time we go for the next grant. Because the grants won't only be about housing, which this one's about. We are facing prospects of sea level rise. We are facing the prospects outdoor in northern New South Wales. There are already programs afoot for the federal government to start making some of these areas which are flood prone to be upgrading the roads, upgrading weirs, upgrading levees, building detention banks to save these towns from the increasing rainfall. And here we are in this small area of Lauderdale where we will have an opportunity to tap into exactly the same issues. And as I say time and time again, I was born in a country that is 2/3 of which is below sea level. And by the way, it's the 3rd largest agricultural exporter in the world. And that is built by building dikes, which we would know as levees, and the water runs down behind those dikes and it's pumped over into the ocean, and there you have productive land for farms and housings. And here we sit at Lauderdale wringing our hands because it might cost us $10 million when there's a developer in the wings who's prepared to pay for it. So this is the most logical place to go. It is high time that we started to realise that there's a housing crisis, There is a need for land. There is a need for areas to be in these places where they have access to the services, and we're already spending all that money. And I can commend Councillor Ritchie for bringing this matter forward, because she has been very much attuned to some of the federal money floating around, and why shouldn't we tap into that?
Councillor Chong, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll say from the front, I'm not going to support this motion. I like all of it down to D, because I absolutely agree it's good for us to assess any funding that's available under the government's housing support program. What a great idea if we can get some funding to help us do things. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse if we start with this is our priority project. We should look at those criteria and the time frame, and then look at what projects we have potentially that would fit those and make sense in the time frame. Not start with a this and it may or may not quite fit the criteria, or may not fit the time frame. The other issue is the urban growth boundary, a problem for a long time in many places. But my understanding with these grants is that if you get them, you have to actually make them work in a relatively short space of time. Now, yes, we all know the government can change the urban growth boundary very quickly. But that's not the way it normally works. It's normally a very long process with lots of community consultation. So I don't think we could put our hands on our hearts and say that even if this was the project we came up with, having done our due diligence and looking at the criteria and the time frame, I don't know that we could guarantee that it could happen in any time frame whatsoever. So I can't support this.
Councillor Warren, please, and then Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also won't be supporting this motion. I just had a look at the program. So it says the Australian Government's Housing Support Program is one of a range of programs designed to help achieve National Housing Accord's target of building 1.2 million new, well-located homes over 5 years from the 1st of July 2024. Well-located was the first thing that jumped out at me. As part of our City Heart Plan, which we've already talked about tonight, we've talked about densifying the inner city where it's close to services, close to transport, close to supermarkets. And Lauderdale, we all know, is down quite a long way from, it's a good 20 minutes from the city, which I know in mainland terms is nothing, but in Hobart that you just about need a passport. My main objection to this is Part E, which says let's make this our priority project. We would normally only do that after we had a workshop, looked at all the options and come together as a group to decide what our priorities were. But I thank Councillor Chong for pointing out that we want something that's not quite maybe not quite shovel ready, but much, much closer to it. We want to get as much bang for our buck as possible if we can get one of these grants. And so it makes sense to build something that we're already planning for. And yes, I know there are stormwater problems in Lauderdale, but I think that we need to address that another way, because I believe this grant is to assist us to build new homes. We can do that more easily closer to the city centre.
Councillor Hunter, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Ritchie for bringing to my attention this grant opportunity, the Australian Government's Housing Support Program, which I believe is a great opportunity. However, I am a strong believer in strategic planning, and I will remind everyone here that the review of the Southern Tasmania Regional Land Use Strategy is currently underway. Now, I won't be looking for developing any areas outside of the urban growth boundary until that plan is finalised, and let it guide us of where we seek to have further development. Now, I could go into climate change here, but I'm not even going to start. But let me tell you, no one's building levees and things that they don't have to, particularly where there's no development at the moment. That is a sinking ship. Now, I'm sure that Council has other priorities, real priorities on the books of where they could provide housing for our community. Councillor Warren mentioned Warrain, which I know work has been underway, and we might potentially have some near shovel-ready projects to submit for this grant application. I think passing this motion, while it does have flexibility, would create an expectation that we are looking to develop Lauderdale for those landowners, where in fact we're not necessarily. So I won't be supporting this motion.
Councillor Walker and then Councillor James.
Thank you. There's a few things to note here. I know that early in my time on council I was very keen to see this area progress and for along the lines, and the more reports we got, the more that the challenges became apparent. I will, Mayor, unlike Councillor Hunter, make a bit of a nod towards climate change. When it comes to that concept, I'm a Thatcherite. I believe the planet deserves the benefit of the doubt, but that's sort of my approach. I have sat in a chamber, though, last term, where a climate emergency was brought forward as something that people wished for council to pass. And there were very earnest, very strong, very heartfelt people speaking about the need for council to declare a climate emergency for a whole lot of reasons. And it'd be rather interesting, again, for me to process if people have said that and held their hand close to their heart on the matter to, progress potentially a housing proposal in an area with what we will euphemistically say is challenges. And it is an interesting concept, and again, I also thank Councillor Ritchie for bringing our attention to this potential grant, because the federal minister involved is a proverbial stone's throw from this chamber. And to be making representation seems to make a lot of sense. I'm interested that we want to pin that area as what we're saying is the most important thing, and I think that might come as a bit of a surprise to people around the Lindisfarne Ridge, who I'd say hello to tonight, because we could get change from $100,000 easy for a structure plan up there in an area that is well located. That's where I'd be putting as a priority if you're wanting to look at more sort of general residential. And again, I will echo, as I've been saying and others have said, that we really want the apartment styles which are missing within our city to be underway, and the place for that is within the Rosny CBD, where there are bang-on services. How's it looking for the future residents of Lauderdale at the moment that you're planning to put on this area as far as medical centres go? We've just heard that the one there's closing. So there's all the services in the CBD. That should be the focus. But as well as that, smart, tick, easy wins like the Lindisfarne Ridge should be the focus. So that's where I'm at. And I won't be supporting this motion. But again, thank the mover for bringing our attention to this, because there are some great opportunities that we have. And this will be signalling our priorities. And I would suggest it's also signalling how serious we take other issues, and I've made a nod towards climate change, and so I won't be supporting the motion.
Councillor Jones, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Excuse me. It's interesting that we have this debate in relation to the grant funding application under Stream 2, and I was approached nearly 2 weeks ago to put a motion forward to council in relation to the Australian Government Housing Support Program, and in particular in relation to Central Lauderdale. Anyway, I telegraphed that motion or indication of the motion to the Chief Executive Officer, and I received a response which is very similar to his comments that are on page 254. Almost verbatim, in that he says there are a range of planning and infrastructure issues that require detailed consideration, subject to the criteria, now that's important, subject to the criteria HSP Stream 2 grants, which are yet to be released, so we do not know what those criteria, or in particular that criterion is, if there is one. There may be an opportunity for council to consider several projects. Now, several projects doesn't mean that we are not going to rule out Central Lauderdale. That's a given, in my opinion. However, we have to be very careful with this, because if we're flagging the actual Part E as part of the motion, which I find a little bit difficult to agree with, given the comments that the Chief Executive Officer has made, and also to at the briefing on Friday, the manager of structure and, anyway, I'll mention his name, Mr Graham, went through a lot of the issues that are basically confronting council if it does identify or seeks to go down the pathway of ensuring that Central Lauderdale, and I'm quoting, ensures that Central Lauderdale is a priority project for grant funding application, unquote. So by the very nature of that, I think we need to wait. By all means, apply for the grant, and the Chief Executive Officer has said that councils are monitoring their website for information and will advise council once more information is available. So let's have the information. Let's know where we're heading with this before we start to raise the banner and full steam ahead and charge the Bastille and support Central Lauderdale, when we should have other options to consider and find out exactly what the criteria are in relation to HSP funding under Stream 2. I will not be supporting the motion.
Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. It's going to be very difficult for this project in Lauderdale to get up if the HSP Stream 2 guidelines, and we don't have the guidelines yet, but if they're anything like the Stream 1 guidelines, we've got issues around compliance with state policies, issues around having the structural plan in place and therefore the project being shovel ready. So according to the Stream 1 guidelines, it would be very difficult to get that project ready by the time that it has to be submitted. Having said that, yes, there's some flexibility in the motion. It says that basically if it doesn't comply with the guidelines, well, we would look at other options for applying for the HSP. But having said that, there is also, as previous speakers have observed, some inflexibility in the motion, in that it says if it does comply with the guidelines, well, this is going to be the preferred project. And I do have an issue with that. Councillor Ritchie mentioned that the Lauderdale Urban Expansion project was not proceeded with by council because of financial challenges. But as was noted in council's announcement about the decision not to proceed, and I do vividly recall the debate, well, also because I went back and watched the recording of it again, about that feasibility study and whether to proceed with the project. And it said in the announcement it was due to a number of factors which included the high environmental risks, complex engineering required, amenity, property and financial impacts on a number of residents, and the substantial cost of public infrastructure required to service the expansion. So there are a number of challenges. According to the feasibility study, we're looking at potentially a truck movement carrying fill every 5 minutes for the next 10 years. We're looking at the issue of, the feasibility study said that it was feasible if the residents in the area all worked together as a consortium, but then there were issues around if there were people who decided not to participate, it would have to be done in an ad hoc manner where the fill in some properties would cause flooding to neighbouring properties. So there were actually a number of challenges, not just financial challenges, behind the Lauderdale urban expansion. Now, even accepting that the Lauderdale urban expansion is doable without and overcoming all these issues, and even accepting that this funding program, it meets the criteria, it then comes to the question, well, should this be our priority project, or are there, as Councillor Walker has astutely pointed out, other areas that may be, in terms of the potential for new housing development, whether it's greenfields, infill, whatever, to be more, have a more efficient proposal, a proposal that's more workable. And I think it's a bit premature to be making a decision that says that we're going to put this project as our priority ahead of other potential projects. So I'm sorry, I cannot support the motion. I do appreciate what Councillor Ritchie is trying to do. I think it's important to resolve the issues of stormwater and infrastructure in Lauderdale and to get funding for it if we can. But I don't believe this is the best way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Any other colleague? Councillor Darko. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see why we're trying to push boulders uphill when we don't necessarily need to. So we all know that climate change is here. It's real. It's getting worse. We hit 1.5 degrees already last year. And if you've looked at the sea level rise maps, this really doesn't seem like a sensible site to be focusing on, does it? I know that other councillors have alluded to this, but I just wanted to put it really bluntly. I feel that we should be focusing on the areas that are a lot easier for us to progress with, and also focusing on what we can do to minimise urban sprawl instead of increasing that urban envelope out and out and out, which we had some deputations today around endangered species. Tasmania is home to a number of endangered species that we should be doing what we can to protect instead of pushing them to the very verges. So I support further densification as outlined in the City Heart Plan, as already spoken to by colleagues, and I urge others to continue their thinking in that direction instead of further urban sprawl.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Councillor Goyne, thank you.
I wasn't planning on speaking, but as a lifelong Lauderdale resident and business owner in the area for several decades, I just wanted to clarify that we have a horseshoe development and it's central Lauderdale that isn't developed, so it's not sprawling further, it's actually containing within. And also wanting to mention that there are quite a lot of services in Lauderdale. We have a wonderful TCM. We have a wonderful Hill Street, which people travel from the city to actually buy produce from. Whilst we don't have a Woolworths, that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, yes, we have lost our doctor's surgery as of today. That is to be confirmed. There is plans for further development of another doctor's surgery in that area. And we definitely need to be addressing the issues in Lauderdale, despite the fact that it would have removed my very many happy memories of playing in knee-deep water in my backyard as a child. So, and I feel sad for the children that may not get to live in that experience.
Except the tank era we're talking about.
So I thank Councillor Ritchie for bringing this motion forward to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? It being none, Councillor Ritchie, won't reply, please.
Yep, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I appreciate the contribution from colleagues. I think to some extent there's probably been an unfortunate misunderstanding of the intention of the motion. Whilst I'm unashamedly saying that the issue at Lauderdale needs to be pushed, it's been going on too long. I don't resolve from that at all, but the motion did. A number of colleagues talked about issues around timing of the project. Could it be completed in the timing that the grant might dictate, the guidelines? It's specifically all covered in there, because I understood completely when drafting the motion that this project may not be what gets proffered forward at all. It may not fit the guidelines. It may not be something that's deliverable within the timeframes. That's why it very specifically talks about that it has to be eligible and it has to be able to meet the applicable timeframes for us to consider putting it forward as a project of priority. It also doesn't exclude other projects from being put forward. None of that happens in this motion, so I'm a bit troubled by where some people are being feeling a bit apprehensive. I think there's a bit of jumping at shadows here unnecessarily. It also requires that any grant put forward in relation to this takes into account all of the GHD reports, and which, of course, if you've read them, and you've read the feasibility study even, talk about the fact that this is the project can be engineered to work sustainably. It talks about having access to services and facilities. It talks about managing all of the flora and fauna constraints. All of those information's already there. So there's a lot of stuff to recommend this actually moving forward. And the one thing that's pleasing me is that we're actually even starting to talk about it again. I can count. I actually think people have actually had some concerns with this motion that don't actually exist. I don't think we're actually putting the horse out there before the race. We're trying to actually get ready to say these grants are notoriously short, the timeframes are notoriously short, let's just give some thought to it to see whether it could possibly be an option. If it's not, we would then go to something else that might be more workable depending on what actually gets outlaid from the government. That's the intention behind what I've put forward. I felt it was drafted sufficiently nimbly and fluidly to enable officers to respond moving forward, given those short timeframes that we've been seeing from federal government grants, to try and get ahead of that part of the game, because we've found lacking or dragging our feet if we're not ready, because they've been very, very short of late. So that was the intention behind it. I respect where people stand in relation to a whole range of issues. This is not going to go away, however, no matter how long we want to try and ignore the issue. We're actually ignoring a very big issue in an area that hasn't been serviced properly.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, colleagues, I'll put the motion. That is that we support the motion seeing in the name of Councillor Ritchie. All those in favour? Against? That's lost. Thank you. Moving now on to item number 10, Councillor's question time. There are no questions on notice, so we move now to 10.3, answers to questions about notice, previous council meetings as listed in the agenda. Item 10.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor, starting this evening from the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr Mayor. My first question relates to the issuing of infringement notices. Of late, I have received a large influx of complaints re-infringement notices around particularly dog registrations. Can Council confirm that whether or not we do reminder notices before we actually refer people to the Tas Collection Service? Because apparently the lack of reminder notices has caused a lot of angst and concern from people being referred to Tas Collection Service in a very short time frame when they didn't even know something was overdue.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr Brennan.
Yes. You want to come and speak next to the microphone, please?
Thanks, Mr Brennan.
The original dog registrations, there were just over 10,000 sent out. The reminder letters were sent out, I think from memory, on the 3rd of October, and there was around about 2,300 sent out. At that stage, we'd got about 7,700 that had paid the registration. After they were sent out, it was reduced down to just over 800, and it was about 800 that were sent to TCS.
Thank you, Mr Brennan. Deputy Mayor, another question?
That was in November, by the way, sorry.
No, that's right. Thank you very much. No, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, well, Councillor Hunter.
Thank you. I've got a question in relation to line marking, and particularly in relation to Spit Farm Road. As I understand, Council gives DSG a list of priorities because they do Council's line marking. My question is, at what point will Council make an exception if something's really bad and engage a contractor to do something specific in regards to line marking?
Councillor Hunter, thank you for the question. I signed a letter about this very recently. Mr Graham, you might provide the expert answer, please.
I'll take that one on notice. And sorry, there's
I'm
multiple.
sure you drafted my letter.
Yeah, certainly did involve in the drafting letter, but there's multiple issues. It is known that the state government have responsibility. If we take on responsibility, then we have to make sure that it's on our maintenance and our inspection schedules where it's very clearly delineated. At the moment, if we start taking on bits and pieces, then we need to have our own register to make sure who's doing what. But I take this on notice and I'll further explain to councillors.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Hunter? Councillor Hume?
Thank you, Mayor. Following on from the Deputy Mayor's question about dog registration collections, I received an email from a resident, and I'm not going to name the resident because the questions I'm going to ask are actually general, but they're related to what this resident has said. And one of the things they said was that they paid a dog registration that was then found to be overdue, and they've actually found the proof in their records that it was paid. The question is, are there other instances of which council officers are aware of payments being made but not being received or recorded, or recorded against the fees to which they're owed for?
Thank you, Councillor. I've received a similar correspondence about that very recently. Mr. Brennan, are you able to provide an answer, please?
I should also clarify, sorry, in the previous response, infringements were sent out in November. The matters weren't referred to TCS until April. So we're working through all of the responses that we've received. There seem to be a number of people that have paid the dog registration but not paid the dog registration until December, and the matters referred to TCS relate to the infringement notices, not the payment of the dog registration.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hume, anything else?
Thank you, Mayor. Also in relation to the same piece of correspondence, I understand that, and this is something that not just this resident has raised, but I've had other residents raise with me before, the issue of contacting council to get a response to a query and not having any contact back. And some residents told me this has happened on multiple occasions in relation to this issue, but in relation to other issues as well. And I just wanted to ask about whether there's work being done on making sure that when queries come to council, they are being tracked to ensure that they are actually followed up on and resolved.
Thank you. Is that a customer contact issue, Ms Wicks? Thank you.
Yes, we do have a customer service charter that we're in the midst of reviewing, which will be coming to council in the next month or two before the end of financial year. This does hold all council officers accountable, and this is tracked through ECM, which is also reported through to the CEO.
Thank you, Ms Wicks. Councillor Jones.
Two questions. Firstly, it's my understanding that the boulevard development has in fact a sunset clause, or commencement work has to commence, and there is a time frame. Through you, Mr Mayor, to the Chief Executive Officer, is there a sunset clause, or is there a timeline excuse me, for the boulevard development to commence? If not, what is happening in relation to that?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor. I'll take that on notice because I'll need to have a look at the agreements that are in place before I provide a response.
Great, thank you. The second question is, could you just provide me and probably my colleagues with the numbers that were for and those against with relation to Councillor Moulder's motion, please?
So 7-5.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, 7-5. So it's sort of a fairly consistent number with these sorts of matters. So Councillor Walker.
0 now.
Councillor Goyne.
I also have two questions. Following on from the conversation regarding the Lauderdale doctor surgery, does the Clarence City Council have any capacity to liaise with the community going forwards about the possibility of another doctor surgery, and is there any plans in the works? I know that there was the possibility of plan coming forwards in the TCM development for a doctor's surgery at some point.
CEO.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Goyne. We'll take that one on notice as well. There's a few elements to that.
My next question is regarding the roadworks on the side of the Tasman Highway going towards the city. It has been an 80-kilometre zone there for couple of month or so. Do we know what the works are, because there doesn't appear to be any active works there, and how much longer until it's completed?
Mr. Graham.
I'll take that one on notice and inform councillors. We'll inquire with DSG. Yep.
Thank you. Just remind them to remove their signs. Councillor Darko.
Thank you. Just asking in terms of roadkill, could we have a summary of what council has done in terms of investigation of the capacity for us to mitigate and avoid roadkill within the municipality, and if we have any plans to improve on that front going forwards?
Thank you. Mr. Graham.
Take that one on notice again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Thank you. I have a question in relation to the public meeting on the 15th of May, and I've already been liaising with the CEO and raising some concerns so that those are on the record. I understand that a facilitator has been appointed, and I'm confident that that person will operate in a professional way. But my question is, has any thought been given how to avoid the perception of conflict of interest, given that I understand that person is a former Chief of Staff to Premier Rockcliffe and has close ties to the AFL?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Warren. CEO or Ms Wicks? CEO, you start.
I'll go. And, thank you, Mayor. I can update Council on things that have transpired today. The facilitator that we had appointed withdrew today because of her concerns over perceived conflict of interest. Sorry, I'm not sure it was funny. So that person has withdrawn. Ms Wicks and I have engaged with other parties today, and we hope to be in a position to announce facilitators tomorrow.
Anything else, Councillor Warren? Councillor Chong? Councillor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. And I apologise first up if I have missed something through communication streams. And to you, Mayor, perhaps to Mr Maher, have we received anything as yet on the proposed Woolworths at Lauderdale, following on from the conversations around Lauderdale?
Well, I got a briefing this morning at Lauderdale Football Club, but Mr Maher, is there anything you're in a position to say in open council at this stage?
Through you, Mayor, I'm sorry, Councillor Kennedy, I don't have an update. I'm happy to investigate it and provide an answer.
Pass it on to the people that have been asking.
Well, thank you, colleague. Councillor Mulder, would you like to ask any questions at all?
Know how particular you are about being in the chamber when you're...
Well, I'm just doing the right thing, as you know, but... so move now on to item number 11. Item number 11, a closed meeting. I'll call for a motion to move into closed meeting. Thank you, Councillor Chong, second, and Councillor Goyne. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Great. Well, thank you to those members of the public who attended in person this evening, all those that also attended via the comfort of their sitting rooms via the live stream. Please end the live stream now. Wonderful. Thanks, Andrew. Moving now on to 11.3.